Good evening and welcome inside the Herald Press Box. How's your bracket doing?
Oh, it's done. I just randomly filled out for the Elite Eight, and I think I maybe got three.
So you didn't do it from the beginning.
I did not do it from the beginning. It
You
would have
told
been
me you were
worse.
going to.
I told you I was going to, but there was no way that I was going to because it just would have been a complete disaster, even more than it is.
So you just filled them up for today's games. This was the first ones you did. And how many did you get right?
Three.
So from the get-go, from day one when I picked mine, I have more in the Elite Eight than you do.
I still would have picked the people that I have in the Elite Eight are still the same people that I would have picked if I would have done it from the beginning, most likely. So
I still have Stanford, Penn State. I got that one.
yeah, I picked West Virginia. I really, really wanted to pick Penn State, but then I also didn't want to pick them.
Mm-hmm.
So I did West Virginia, and
so West Virginia beat them in the regular season.
Yeah, I know.
2-0, and it wasn't even close. So can't really fault you on that pick, but I can because I'm right. So
yeah.
Then I had South Carolina in that bottom half.
Yeah.
But you didn't pick them.
I did not. I didn't want them to win. That was just a clear I don't want them to win.
And obviously have Duke.
Yes.
And I didn't get anybody else right on that side of the bracket.
Yep. And you had Florida?
Nope.
Oh, you didn't have Florida.
I had Central Florida.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, that's right. Because didn't you have them going to your Final Four?
Yeah. So who were your three that you had right?
Stanford, Florida, and Duke.
Okay. Stanford, Florida, and Duke. Yeah, so a bit of a shakeup in the fact that we're not going to have all the one seeds. North Carolina got beat today by Princeton, and that was an overtime goal, right?
Yep.
And it got beat by. So the Elite Eight is set, and that'll take place next weekend, and then we'll go into the Final Four Soccer Cup in 2 weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to try to fill it out again for the next round?
Oh, I filled it out completely.
Okay. So who'd you have winning it all?
Stanford.
Who'd you have them beating?
I don't want to tell.
Duke?
No, North Carolina. Somehow along the way, I knew in the beginning of the season, or near the beginning of the season, that North Carolina was full of injuries. Yet somehow when I decided to fill out this bracket, that completely left my brain.
Uh-huh.
And then they lost. So Stanford's my only hope. Which is great.
Yeah, good tournament so far, though. Mm-hmm. Whether or not your brackets stayed alive or not.
It's better when it's not alive.
Yeah, right.
Makes it more interesting.
One thing that we touched on at the end of last segment and that we can start off with today was the NWSL's move to Salt Lake City, as it is now confirmed. FCKC will be moving to Salt Lake City. I'm waiting on a team name, and they did announce where they'll be playing at. I didn't check to see if that stadium is where the real Salt Lake team plays or not.
I did not see that. Where do you remember the stadium name?
I do not remember what it was. No.
To look it up. See if I can find it at some point here.
So this move to Salt Lake City from FCKC, and my main, not really a gripe because it's already been a gripe on this podcast that we've done before, and so this kind of continues that trend, and that is the lack of top level soccer in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Now that KC moves out of the Midwest, there's only one team
Right.
in the Midwest, and that's the Red Stars.
Yeah.
And we've talked. It's been a couple of months ago that we brought it up, and or I brought it up, and how I don't know if I'm worried or just really confused by the lack of one talent that comes to the Midwest. And now looking at, we have elite eight teams, right? And Penn State is the closest team that you could put in the Midwest. Everybody else is on the East Coast. You have Stanford and UCLA on the West Coast, and then you have Baylor to the south, and Penn State's the closest thing you can get to the Midwest. So we have two things right now that are clearly showing this non-elite level of soccer from the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a point I wanted to make about another lost opportunity
Right.
from FCKC.
Right. I think that's why I was kind of hoping that FCKC wasn't going to be moving there, just because I was hoping that they were expanding. I realized that that would have been a quick expansion in the sense of, if you add this team, you're going to have to add another team. And then you already know that FCKC is on the move. But I think we're going to need to give it time, because I think Minnesota might have some stuff going on with their men's team that's going to be able to bring in a women's team, is my hope for that. But I like the move. I said at the end of last episode I do. And I kind of going out on a limb there saying that I like it, because I usually am not a fan of going where there's a men's team already, just because on the outskirts, to me, that's usually, and it's kind of been that experience, usually not a positive relationship between the men's and the women's teams.
And this move here was directly correlated to the men's team, right?
Right.
The ownership will be the same. They're supposedly going to treat the women's team to the exact same extent that they treat their men's, as far as marketing goes, and as far as equipment and opportunities from a promotional and business operation go.
Mm-hmm.
Which is sort of the same as North Carolina's situation, but the men's side of North Carolina are not at the MLS level. So this is sort of a guinea pig, right, for this type of partnership.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. I guess we'll find out. I'm interested to see their logo and their name. We'll have to grade them on that one. I'm really afraid that it's going to be the men's logo, because the men's logo is just absolute crap.
Just a crest, isn't it? Is that what it is?
Yeah, pretty much. It's terrible.
And so speaking about that and the fact that they haven't been released yet, and really nothing was said leading up to this, and it all seemed to sort of happen. Everything you read, it happened in a 2-week span. And one of the things at the beginning of the year I remember hearing or reading or hearing somebody talk about was the league's push to become a transparent league, and to let the fans in to see what's going on, and everything behind the scenes would be put out in the open, to bring in that personalization with the fan base. And this is the exact opposite of that, right? This is the league sort of going behind the FCKC backers' backs and not letting them know, hey, we're taking your team and throwing them 1,000 miles to the west for you to never see again. And who knows if you're ever going to have a team again.
Right.
So from looking on it from a league standpoint, I absolutely hate the move because of that, because of this, not necessarily a promise to be more transparent, but the opportunity to be transparent. And what they wanted to do makes so much sense, and they failed to do that here.
Right. And that's essentially the truth. But I think in this case, if you're moving a team, I understand why they were quiet about it, because there's really, if the league saw it as not being beneficial to them to stay there, then what's the point? If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So either you can say something or you cannot say something, and they just decided not to. And then they moved on. whether that was kind of, if that just all happened, it all seemed essentially spur of the moment. So were Real Salt Lake on top of their game and they just stepped to it right when they heard that FC KC was on the move? Or was it the league being shady?
So I'm going to take you back to your previous stances.
Yes.
On this podcast.
Yes.
Your stances of loyalty.
Yeah. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, so this is different from that. I'll give you a chance to explain yourself.
So now you're taking my spot in the loyalty seat.
This was a good opportunity to let this situation unfold, and if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. We don't know anything else about the franchise other than that they're moving. So right.
We had that inclination essentially the whole season, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
And nothing was said, right?
Well, yeah.
That was all just guesses and people speculating.
But it was it not essentially set that
the league never said anything?
Okay.
This is a professional league that should be handled in a professional manner. One, they don't have a commissioner, which makes the situation only worse.
Right.
But that's no excuse.
Right.
Well, that's zero excuse.
Right.
That might be the reason, but there isn't a zero excuse to not give the people who have been behind this franchise for the years that they've been in KC. So put yourself in those shoes. So if, say, you're a KC backer and you're hearing all these rumors, chances are, if you're a big enough fan, you're not going to believe those. If there were speculation that Chicago was going to leave, the Red Stars were going to leave, you would believe that, and then you would just give up on the franchise because they're leaving you.
Those are two different franchises, though.
I know that's fine. If that was being said,
I wouldn't believe Chicago.
Kansas City's first year in the league, Dan Lauletta's article was talking about how they averaged 4,300 people, which led the league in attendance.
And what were they at this past season?
Over 1,000.
And do you know the season before that?
Chicago's, in that sense, Chicago's not been any better than FCKC's attendance.
I would have never guessed that, but I think Chicago has more of a draw for people. Because if you look at who's on the team, not that FC KC doesn't.
Yeah, who KC has?
Right. But to me, in my mind, it does.
And we've talked about you've talked about how the Chicago's location situation. I mean, they're out in a suburb, which to me, I've always said I've liked that because it's easy for me to get to.
Right.
Well, you say that you're not a huge fan of where they're at. You look at FCKC, that's a much better situation to get to.
But are you gonna go travel to Kansas City, or are you gonna go travel to Chicago?
What do you mean?
Let's pretend.
Me or somebody that lives in that city?
Let's just pretend. So let's pretend you don't live in Illinois, first off, because it's going to make more sense for you to travel to Chicago than it is to Kansas City.
Well,
maybe not.
It's
maybe not. But
Kansas City is only an hour and a half more than Chicago for me.
Right, but Chicago has more of a draw to an outside person.
The city itself or the team?
The city itself. Do you know what I'm saying? So if they're going to go watch a game, are they going to go to Kansas City or are they going to want to go to Chicago?
And you're talking outside of the sport. So you're going to go there for a full day? Because, it's Chicago, for me,
right,
in my opinion.
Right.
So would you rather go to Salt Lake City?
Yeah.
Or Kansas City?
Salt Lake City, for sure.
You've been there?
I have not been there, but I've always wanted to go there.
So you've never been to Kansas City?
I have been in their airport. No,
I'd rather go to Kansas City.
You would rather go to Kansas City?
Yeah. So back to the point I was making.
About loyalty?
Yeah, and about the league stabbing that fan base and organization
So
in the
what?
back.
Oh, I'm not saying that they didn't, but what?
And could this have been handled better than the league? Yes.
Yes, it definitely could have been handled better, but I'm trying to think about a comparison. So in the WNBA, the stars are moving to Vegas. Was that, I'm trying to think if that was like announced during the season, after the season, and then how long after that was it determined that they were moving to Vegas? Just to see as a comparison, to see
And
if
I don't
that's
know.
just what happens, right? If that's just what happens when you have a team moving.
But there's no set guidelines for,
Right.
hey, let's wait until the day before that we announce this to blindside somebody. And that's kind of what I started
So
off
you
with. This
think,
was a perfect opportunity for the league to be the transparent league that they wanted to be, and to set that standard for themselves as far as taking care of the fans and taking care of the players who still are up in the air, or if their contracts are transferring to this new team.
well, that's a whole issue, different issue outside of this, just the
But
player contracts in general.
within the league.
Right.
And who knows if they've been notified or when they were told.
Do you think that the league ambushed FCKC? Is that what you're assuming with this?
Ambushes then tried to force them out to.
Not ambush them as in force them out, more ambush them telling them that they're out. Like, do you think they came to them one day and just said, hey, you're out, versus talking with them throughout the season and then determining at the end of the season, or whenever it was determined 2 weeks ago, that they were going to be no longer?
I don't think I have any grounds to speculate on that. I think the best opportunity as far as how this came about was that the league was approached by an outsider, that outsider being Real Salt Lake, their owners, wanting to get in the league, and then who's the best opportunity to bring this out here.
Right.
And conversations led to FCKC being that team that was needing more support from an ownership standpoint.
Right. Well, yeah. And if we're going to switch to the ownership standpoint, then why not move the team?
Right. I have never said, and I'm never going to say, that this team shouldn't have been moved.
Right.
I mean, we've talked about that, and I've never said no, they need to stay in Kansas City.
Yeah.
My first point tonight was just that this is just another anomaly about the whole no top level soccer in the Midwest, and that point is proven by Kansas City moving out, and what kind of destruction that has on any amateur leagues, or just younger players not having a professional team or great collegiate team to look up to.
Right.
So that's the point I was making with that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the Midwest will get something, hopefully within the next year or two, is my hope. But who knows?
And I'm not counting Minnesota Midwest.
I know, I just thought of another Midwest place that you had consistently talked about on here, which I think is going to be their first option.
And that's Cincinnati.
Yeah, that it really doesn't make sense. If we're going to do Midwest, it doesn't make sense to go outside of Cincinnati.
Right. Or, I mean, there's a chance at St. Louis, since they've been looking for another professional team to move in. Now with nobody but the MLB team there in St. Louis, since their football team left, and they had talked about a MLS team when you move in. So yeah, there's St. Louis or Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Let's say be the final two. How do you think this is handled with a commissioner? What would have been different? Do you think it was easier with no commissioner?
Well, I guess I have a question for you. You you had stated, and I don't know if this was fact or if this was just what you thought was happening. You said that Real Salt Lake came to the NWSL. Now, is that true?
That's
Is
what
that
I said.
okay?
That's what my best guess as to what happened. If I had
Okay.
to speculate on anything.
So well, first off, if that was the case and the NWSL just said, okay, let's just pick this team, we're going to pick this team, that's where I would have liked a commissioner in the hopes of being able to make that transition where it's not feeling like a club is being forced out of the league.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a commissioner is going to be someone that we can essentially hold accountable. Right now, I don't even know, it's a group that we're holding accountable, and I think that they were able to essentially get away with, if this was a shady deal, they were able to get away with it. So I think a commissioner is someone that's going to lead that transition a little bit easier. So yeah, I think it would have been easier to do.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've seen, or I'm sure there have been quotes released by NWSL executives on this whole situation, but I can picture this going over a lot smoother if we're seeing quotes from an NWSL commissioner or a conversation the NWSL commissioner has with the Real Salt Lake owners and with the FCKC owners about this change that's happening, right?
Right. And I would assume that would have been a constant, if it wasn't already a constant conversation between FCKC and a commissioner during the whole year, or more of a conversation at the end of the year if they were really looking to move that team.
And just quickly searching NWSL commissioner in the past month of searches, I don't see anything. There is an article here that I want to take a look at now that it's called LA is ready for new National Women's Soccer League team. So take a look. The Occidental Weekly is the article. You had wanted to talk about Oz.com?
Perfect. Because I almost forgot about that one. So Thursday, first off, I read the site wrong. I thought Melbourne City played Thursday night. They actually ended up playing Friday night. And so I go on the site and I go on the full schedule. And there's only 2 games listed for this past weekend. Just like, okay, are they being televised? Like, why don't I have access to them? I should have access to all the games, even if they're televised. So I messaged them on Twitter and I said, hey, where's this City game at? Am I just missing it? What's going on? And their response was not what I was expecting, actually. They said that they have access to the games that have someone essentially taping them, broadcasting them. So if no one is at the game and no one is doing the camera work, then obviously they can't put it on the website because they don't have any sort of footage. So I was a little appalled by that. I wasn't expecting that whatsoever. And so I went back to their site and I looked at the rest of the season, and I think the beginning of December, there's 1 game. So there's usually 4 games every weekend. Next week is a little bit weird where there's only 3 games. But it's usually 4 games every weekend. And it's either 1 or 2 games for the rest of the season. You're not seeing all games. And that's a W League issue. That's not a Oz.com issue.
So those are already set. Those have already been determined of which ones are going to be recorded?
As far as I know, yes.
You can't apply to be a camera crew member to videotape games for their viewing?
Let me just fly to Australia.
Well, I didn't know if you didn't get this Dash internship, maybe you were looking for another opportunity.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I don't know about Australia. I will.
You will? When's the deadline?
Good question. There was no deadline on it.
Oh, no deadline.
No deadline. As far as I know. But that was I don't know. I guess I was expecting every game to have a camera person, and maybe that's just because the NWSL does. So I just assumed that the W League would as too. And
Not the case.
so there's no hate on Oz.com. Still 1,000 times better than Go90.
But you were originally thinking it was
Oh, I thought it was.
Oz.com?
I thought it was an Oz.com issue where they were just not going to have it.
So your $5 is still worth the $5.
So my $5 is still worth the $5. I checked the rest of the schedule. If it doesn't change, and if nothing is added, it's still going to be the better option for me to pay the $5 a month than pay each game individually for Melbourne City. Because then
How much
I
is
get
each game?
$3. So I think I get 4 more games. So there's 14 rounds. And let's see, we're in round 4. So half of their season is online as of right now, which is a joke. Speaking of the W League, I can run through some scores.
Yeah.
So Brisbane Roar played Adelaide. Brisbane won 1-0. Lone goal by Haley Rasso in the 86th minute. Then we had Sydney FC versus Melbourne City. 2 of Melbourne City's players, Kaya Simon and Alana Kennedy, had played for Sydney FC in the past. It was 3-2 Sydney FC. Goals for Sydney came by Ludbrook, Polias, and Simpson. And the goals for City came by Ralston and Crummer. Newcastle versus Canberra. Canberra won 1-2. Goals by Sykes and Presley. And then there was Perth Glory versus Melbourne Victory. Perth Glory took it 3-1. Goal by Rachel Hill and a brace from Sam Kerr. Perth Glory and Brisbane Roar are at the top with 9 points, and Sydney FC is still at the bottom with 3 points. And the attendance this week at each game were all, there was 1 game over 1,000, and all the other 3 games were over 2,000, which is the highest attendance I've seen consistently over all 4 games in a weekend. So that was cool.
Yeah.
They're about, I looked at the average for the NWSL, and they're a little bit less than half of their attendance, which kind of expected a little bit, just because it's not, I'm a little bit surprised that soccer's not as big, but I think they're getting there. I think I said on Thursday that a lot of the teams are doing double headers with their men's team, because pretty much every men's team has a women's team, or each club has a men's and a women's team.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Matildas have a 2-game friendly coming up with China. They play Wednesday and Sunday, which might be part of the reason why there's only 3 games this weekend. But Rachel Hill can join the Houston Dash when she comes back to the NWSL. I do believe she has 6 or 7 goals in 4 games.
You're making a pitch for her to join the Dash?
I am definitely making a pitch for her to join the Dash.
She can't play. She's not a defender.
Yes. Well, I have some
She's not
names
better
in
than
mind.
Ojai. So unless you just want somebody to run the bench. That's the one thing the Dash have, are forwards.
That don't score. Okay, well, Ojai wasn't playing this season, so I'm giving her, she's got the pass.
And Rachel didn't score?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm adding an offensive body to that team that can't score a goal, and I will work on the defense throughout the rest of the W League.
Uh-huh. And that's with
I'll
no
make some pitches.
first-round draft pick for the Dash, too. So
That's right. Beautiful.
I think you're just setting yourself up for disappointment if you're adding another forward in free agency.
Well, I think it's worth it.
You're going to wind up in Salt Lake City, keep running a team like that. Another thing that I had wanted to mention last episode, and I didn't say anything to you until we were off the air, and that was an update on the Winter Olympics and a team that will be featured in the Winter Olympics this year, which start on February 9th, and that is the Nigerian women's bobsled team. First team to represent, was it all of Africa? First team to represent all of Africa in the Winter Games? Or just Nigeria,
Really?
maybe? Now that I say that, I can't remember for sure which one it is. But yeah, it's one of those. They're at least the first team to represent Nigeria in the Winter Olympics. This team has been compared to the Jamaican team from Cool Runnings, and even so that one of the members of this bobsled team built the first sled that they practiced out of. It was a wooden sled that she built herself, carved and nailed together for them to practice on. And then they started to be funded through a GoFundMe account that was up to $75,000. And they were able to practice at a facility and use a real sled to prepare for this run into the Olympics.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you said you'll have a team to cheer for in the Americans, but I'll cheer for.
Well, we'll find out.
Nigerian
My team has to make the Olympics. They have not made the Olympics yet. So
if they don't, maybe they can have a bobsled NIT tournament.
Oh yeah, wouldn't that be great?
I think so.
That's usually how it goes if you don't make it, right? You always
just make your own tournament of a whole bunch of other sucky teams that suck just as much as you do.
You get a consolation game.
Yep.
I hated that in tournaments. Consolation winner. I don't want a trophy for being a consolation winner.
That's a lie.
That I didn't want a trophy?
Yeah.
I would rather have it say third place than consolation. Like, what does consolation mean? You got fifth place? Or what?
Sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Just put the place on the trophy.
One of my teams that I drafted in our pick 'em, UCLA beat number 3 Baylor this weekend. So I wanted to point that out, that the Bruins, Jordan Canada and Monique Billings, took care of business. And even though Oregon did lose to Louisville today, I'm not worried, and I do not plan on dropping them, so don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, well, my team, UConn, beat Maryland today pretty handily. Or I should say one of my teams that I picked. Which I wasn't. I was expecting a closer game, I guess, than 25 points. But
so are you thinking about dropping Baylor now after that beating from UCLA?
There's a possibility.
With South Carolina and Mississippi State on the board?
They're on the board, but they're not on my list yet. Yet. I'm going to give it some time. I'm not going to overreact.
That'd barely be the first thing you did.
No.
Is there anything else you wanted to touch on, talk about?
No, that's all that I really had. I don't know. No, I think I'm good.
Okay. This Thursday, Thanksgiving, I don't think you planned on doing an episode, did you?
No.
Okay. We're at 35 minutes now on this episode, and yeah, maybe we'll have a few good stories come up this weekend, and we could touch on all those a week from now. But for this episode, if you don't have anything else, I'm finished as well. So we'll see you next Sunday, and thanks for stopping by the Hero Press Box.